Been a long time since I've done this. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Caitlin. If you're new here, I'm 22, I live in Melbourne, and I film a lot of book recommendation type videos and reading vlogs. I read mainly romance and YA novels, so if that is your cup of tea, then please feel free to hang around and interact. I always love chatting with you guys. This feels weird. It feels weird, but it doesn't. It's very familiar, because I haven't filmed a YouTube video in such a long time. When was the last time I filmed a video? Let me double check that. The last video that I filmed and uploaded was in July of last year, and it was a reading vlog. And I feel like I filmed so many reading vlogs towards, like, I was gonna say the end of last year, but towards the end of when I stopped filming. Because they were just so much easier to film, although they were a lot harder to edit. It just took such a long time, and I think I was dealing with work and trying to put my attention into the business that I wasn't enjoying filming anymore. I was enjoying talking about books, but planning the videos, actually like setting them up and filming them was just kind of getting a little bit too much. So I decided to take a break. But for these past few weeks, I've been dying to get back in front of the camera and talk to you guys about the books that I've been reading and the books that I've been loving, and we're finally doing it today. Mainly because today's the only day that I've actually put makeup on for the past few weeks, so I wanted to look presentable for my first video back, okay? Now you can probably already tell by the title and the thumbnail, but today we are revisiting my favorite books of 2022. I haven't checked this list in a while. It's been a hot minute, so these are going to be as much of a surprise to you as they are to me. I have no idea if they're in any order. They're on Goodreads. I can probably arrange that. Also, I have so many shelves on Goodreads that I try to put every book that I read into at least a couple of shelves. I love giving trope recommendations, and that really helps with planning my videos. So if you guys are ever looking for recommendations that I haven't filmed, please go ahead, friend me on Goodreads. My profile is public as well, so you don't have to friend me if you don't want to. And go ahead and just like have a look through my shelves and find books that you want to read, because that's what I'm here for. We are looking at my faves 2022 shelf. From the get-go, I can see that there are 16 books on this list. So this, it might take a while, it might not, who knows? No way. Okay, I just kind of spoiled it for myself because I scrolled, I couldn't help it. The first book that I added to my favorites list in 2022 was Imago by N.R. Walker. I remember reading this. I read it for a rating my library's romance novels video, which was fun to film, but at the same time I remember disliking the other books that I read in that reading vlog. But like N.R. Walker, she saved the whole thing, honestly. I gave this book 4.5 stars. It was so good. I loved it. I have even gone back and reread scenes since I finished it. My rating system is kind of, actually I pinched this from someone on Instagram because I thought that sounds so much like how I rate my books, and so I did want to pinch it. It was from Kevin T. Norman on Instagram. I'll link him down below as well. I just thought, I was like, this sounds so much like me. 1 star is essentially, I hated it, I really disliked it, it wasn't my cup of tea, but someone put effort into this, so I'm gonna give it a 1. 2 stars is that the idea was there, it just wasn't done very well. 3 stars is, it was good. It was fine, it was readable, I enjoyed it enough to finish it, obviously, but probably not gonna reread it anytime soon. 4 stars is that it was beautiful, I really enjoyed it. Potentially I'm gonna reread it, I might even buy it. But there's just that something missing that didn't quite keep it over the line to a 5-star rating. 5 stars, of course, is perfection. It's got everything that I want, it was written so well, I know I'm gonna buy it, I know I'm gonna reread it, and these are the books that I'm gonna recommend to people when they ask me. So anyway, now that we've kind of gotten past that, back to Imago. So 4.5 stars, so I loved it. Probably gonna buy it. I've already reread it, but it was just lacking that little something to give it that extra 0.5 to a 5-star read. Oh, fabulous. I said, I can't believe it took me this long to get around to reading this book. I won't say too much in this review because I'll be covering it in my upcoming YouTube video. Thanks, Caitlin. I thought this book was so fascinating. So we follow Lawson Gale, who's a lepidopterist, and he's coming over to Tasmania to try to look for this butterfly that may or may not even exist. When he gets there, he meets Jack Brighton, who's the local parks and wildlife officer, and they kind of meet on the plane on the way there, and some kind of connection is between them from the get-go. They don't know what it is, but I think both of them can kind of feel it. So this whole novel pretty much is Lawson and Jack trying to find out what the hell this bond is between them, while Lawson is busy trying to find these butterflies, and Jack's tagging along for the ride because the part of the park that Lawson is investigating just so happens to fall under his jurisdiction. So they're kind of forced to spend more time together. I shelved this book as a feel-good romance, strangers because they did not know each other at all at the beginning of this book, and of course faves of 2022. It's also a very quick read. There is a book 2 as well as a 2.5 novella. And also, if you've read N.R. Walker's Red Dirt Heart series, there's even a crossover between those two, which was so much fun to read. I honestly loved it. Also, book 2, more than book 1, had that protagonist getting injured kind of trope, where one is down for the count and the other is honestly freaking out about it and just wanting to make sure they're okay. I love that trope in books. I know some people might think that's weird. I don't want my characters to get injured, but I love watching them like freak out about the other and caring for them. So anyway, moving on. Book 2 on my 2022 favorites list is Savage Rivals by Becca Steele. Honestly, not a shock. Kind of shocked that I read it in 2022. Thought I would have read it before then. But anyway, this was a 5-star read. I have reread this book so many times since I read it the first time. I am obsessed. And I actually wrote a solid review for this one. So let's go through the blurb first. So this is set in high school, but it is still very mature writing style, and our characters themselves are also very mature for their age. So we're dealing with Asher and Levi, and they are the captains of their respective high schools' soccer teams, and there has been a rivalry between their team for, I want to say, a couple of years now. It's just a thing. They don't get along. Of course, there is always a situation, something that happens that makes them cross that line that they never thought that they would end up crossing, which is where all the excitement in this book comes. So this is a new adult enemies to lovers set in high school romance. Perfection. I feel like you can't really say a whole lot more about this book without giving it away, but I was obsessed. Let's go through my review for this one. So I said I'm mad at myself for taking so long to finally get around to reading this book. I said that it was so absorbing that I didn't even realize until I'd finished the book that I barely highlighted anything, and I'm someone who typically, when I'm really enjoying a book, highlights a lot. So the fact that I was so absorbed in this that I barely highlighted like 3 passages, that's saying something. Asher and Levi, I've said, are some of my absolute favorite main characters. I'm obsessed with them. I love their chemistry, the rivalry, the bond, everything was perfect. And I have said, if you're in the mood for an enemies to lovers, look no further than this one. So, high praise coming from 2022 Caitlin, and I agree with her wholeheartedly. So I have shelved this book as forbidden relationships, since there's that whole rivalry between their teams, set in high school, athletes, enemies to lovers, and awakened sexuality. Next book on this list is Strings Attached by Riley Hart. This is another 5-star rating. How good? I mean, these are my favorites for a reason, but anyway. This one, the blurb grabbed me straight away. It is a age gap best friend's dad romance. So we have our 2 main characters. What are their names? I don't like when they don't put both characters' names in the blurb, because then I really have to go digging to try to find them. Harrison and Xander. So Xander is the younger character, Harrison is his best friend's dad. The thing is, they didn't know who the other was when they first started flirting at the bar. Xander knew that his best friend's dad was in town for their college graduation, but he's never met him before. He's only ever heard of the guy. So when he sees this really attractive dude at a bar, he's gonna go for it. It's not until the next day or a couple of days later when they're at their graduation and he sees this guy standing next to his best friend that he's like, shit, I may have had sex with my best friend's dad. Rip me. So having a little bit of a look through my review, I said that Harrison and Xander were perfect characters. They were so kind and loving. They've worked so hard despite the shit hand that the universe dealt them. They're absolutely perfect for one another, and I loved reading about them discovering their feelings for one another. I also said that it was much more of a feel-good romance than I was expecting. I didn't think it was going to be high angst, purely because I don't read high angst, so if it was, I wouldn't have delved into it in the first place. But typically, I feel like when you read like a best friend's dad type romance, or anything with that sort of trope, even best friend's brother, for example, I feel like the climax of those particular stories is generally revealing the relationship to the family member that you're hiding it from. So going into this book, I thought that the big climax was going to be revealing the relationship to the best friend. It wasn't, surprisingly. Little spoiler, but also not really. It happens in the first few chapters. Like, they can't really hide their attraction and their connection to one another, and the best friend figures out pretty much straight away, which was so refreshing in a book like this. We got most of that plot line out of the way in the very beginning of the book, and the rest of it was just spent watching them fall for one another, learning about each other, and realizing that they wanted more out of this connection than simply a one-night stand. The only negative thing that I had to say, and it wasn't even really that negative, it was just that I wished we got to see more of Xander's character developing throughout the novel, especially towards the end, like between the last chapter and the epilogue. Would have liked to have seen a little bit more in there, but you can't please everybody. I shelved this book as an age gap romance, best friend's dad, failed casual relationship, a feel-good romance, friends to lovers, because, you know, they were friends in a way. Ooh, next is A Guy Walks Into My Bar by Lauren Blakely. I remember reading this on my Lauren Blakely binge, fell in love with it. I remember saying in, it might have been a wrap-up that I filmed last year, that Lauren Blakely can do no wrong. Whatever she writes, I'm gonna love it. Unfortunately, that has been proved false. There have been a few books that I've started by her that I just haven't been able to get into, unfortunately. But this was not one of them. This was another 5-star review. So this book is set in London. It is a bartender and athlete romance. So one of our main characters is a bartender in London. Fantastic synopsis, Caitlin. Our other main character is an athlete. I think he might be a hockey star. Probably wrong. I honestly can't remember that detail. Essentially, our bartender has a rule that he does not hook up with anyone who comes into said bar. But this particular guy was kind of hard to resist. Eventually, he was like, look, what could possibly go wrong with a hot, no strings attached fling while he's in London, because our athlete is originally from the States. He's just over here temporarily. That never works out the way you think it's going to, because it's a romance book. They start developing feelings for each other. It's beautiful. It's really funny to read, and of course I loved it because I gave it 5 stars. What did I write about this book? I said here, I was so excited to delve into this book and I was not disappointed. It was funny, flirty, but also vulnerable and beautiful. I wrote that I loved both of our main characters and I loved seeing them realize that falling for one another was inevitable despite what they wanted to believe. The thought that literally just came to my head was, wow, these are all really good books. No shit, Caitlin, they're in your favorites list for a reason. Next on this list is Iris by Eden Finley. I'm not surprised. I loved this book so much. Thought that I was like exaggerating how much I loved it whenever I thought about it, and then reread it again when Rogue came out and remembered all over again. Essentially, Iris got the nickname Iris because it stands for I require intense supervision. He was pretty much the class clown of the military, and then that was where he also met Brock, whose code name was Saint, because he was the golden boy. He could do no wrong. He was good at everything. Fast forward however many years into the future, Iris and the Mike Bravo team, which is who he works for, they're all ex-military people. They're all really good at their job. They got called in to extract a military mission gone wrong just to see if they can rescue anyone who may possibly still be alive. Guess Iris' surprise when the lone survivor that they managed to pull out of this hostile situation is no one other than Saint himself. Now, once Saint is healed, Iris's boss, Travis, wants to recruit him into the Mike Bravo team, and I'm sure we can all guess how that's going to go. No fraternization between teammates, but it's a romance novel, so anything can happen. I'm so like happy that I wrote reviews for all of these books because it's making it so much easier to talk about my thoughts. Because let me tell you, the past, like, however many books I've read over the past few months, no reviews. Absolutely nothing. We're lucky if I even sort them into my shelves. Sorry if there's lighting changes, by the way. I am using a ring light, but also my window is right over there. And Melbourne weather, man. It's meant to be 23 today, but the sun keeps coming and going. So apologies if the lighting is like fluctuating. So I've said here that Iris was already, when I read this in January, one of my favorite books of the year. And Iris and Saint are 100% my favorite couple out of all of Eden Finley's works. And when I wrote that, I was including the CU Hockey series. They have overtaken Beck and Jacobs as my favorite Eden Finley couple. I said that this book included so many tropes and aspects that I love and adore, and I'm kind of sad that it flew by, but also happy because their story was so beautiful and I will definitely be rereading it in the future. Caitlin was not wrong, because I've already reread this book quite a few times. I shelved this book as a failed casual relationship because nothing was supposed to happen between them, but it did. Forbidden relationship for pretty much the same reason. Friends to lovers because they were friends before they were lovers anyway. Military romance, a protagonist gets injured romance. Next is a novella. I actually own this one. Heck yeah, one that I can hold up. I've been slowly going through and purchasing physical copies of all of the romances on my favorites lists because I read them all on my Kindle, so I don't really buy them, and it's not like you can just walk into a bookstore and grab them unless you're like me and you own one for a living. Oh, I so forgot to say that in my intro. By the way, I own a bookstore. We'll come back to that later. The next book on this list is gonna sound so sus, and what's even worse is that I read this on a public beach, and I was so paranoid of someone walking behind me and seeing what I was reading. But that is Love in a Truckstop Bathroom by Sebastian O'Connor. This is honestly a tiny book. Like, hold up, compared to another book. Okay, so Ake, Marley Valentine, Love in a Truckstop Bathroom. It's like, I don't know if you can see that. There's a pretty severe height and width difference between these, but doesn't change the context of the book because it's fantastic. Also, when I finish adding to my collection, 100%, I'm doing an updated bookshelf tour. Also, there is a book haul coming very soon because I may or may not have bought a shit ton of books the other day, but they're coming from like all over the world, so we have to wait for them to get here first. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did, let me just tell you that. So we're following our characters, August, who is a guidance counselor at a high school, and West, who just so happens to be the sports gym teacher at the same high school. Unbeknownst to them, they both have kind of like a minor crush on the other, even though they've known each other for years, and they both think that the other character isn't interested in them. So they turn to this online dating app where they message this person, and because they're in such a small town, they decide that they want to keep their identities hidden. So even when they get together to hook up in a truck stop bathroom, they're making sure that they cannot even see the other person, that they're either wearing blindfolds, they're in a dark room, their eyes are closed, whatever precautions they have to take. But what's so exciting for the reader is that from the get-go, you know that it's August and West. Like, they have a crush on each other in person. The more that they talk to each other in person, the more that this crush develops, but they're also falling in love with each other online without even knowing about it, and it's so exciting to read. It was so sweet and I absolutely loved it. Now I can feel myself getting excited, so let's read what I wrote in my review. Also, this was another 5-star rating, by the way. Adored it. Okay, so I said that in a Facebook group I asked for recommendations for some novellas or short stories, and this was mentioned so many times that I decided to give it a go, and obviously I fell in love with it. I said that somehow within such a small space, Sebastian O'Connor has managed to construct a beautiful relationship, give us backstory, character development, and enough spice to keep us all happy. Like, the fuck? How did you do that? I shelved it as anonymous because that's kind of what I've been shelving the books that fall into that falling in love but also online without knowing it type trope. I don't really know how to condense that. I shelved this as a colleagues romance since they are colleagues at the same school. A failed casual relationship because this was just meant to be an online hookup. They weren't meant to actually fall for one another. A feel-good romance because it's just so sweet. Not full length because it is a novella. Next is another book from Lauren Blakely and also a novella, which is where my want to read short stories came from. This is Top Notch Boyfriend by Lauren Blakely. Another 5-star rating. Why doesn't it tell me where my rating is? Hello? Once again, I have no idea what the characters' names are in this book. So essentially with this book, both of our characters attended some kind of fair, festival type event. One of them is British, by the way, and they just kind of clicked straight away. They've both been burned by love before. They just kind of want a fling for the time being. And so our athlete character, whose sport I cannot remember for the life of me, has this grand idea that he needs a date when he's going to Vegas for the weekend. So why not ask this stunning guy that he's just met, who also doesn't want a relationship, to be his fake boyfriend for the weekend. So in my review, I wrote that I absolutely loved everything about this book, added like 4 of her other books to my TBR, and in brackets I have so excited that these boys are going to get their own full-length novel. Hello? I don't think that novel has been written yet. If it has, let me know. But anyway, I shelved this book as failed casual relationship, feel-good romance, not full-length of course because it's a novella, and strangers, since they did not know each other at the beginning of this book. Next is, oh, not one that I own personally, but I do have for my business, so I'm gonna grab a copy. Shameless self-plug here, I do own an online bookstore based in Melbourne, Australia, so if you want to check that out, I'll leave the link in the comments below. We also ship internationally, so if you have been watching me for a little while and couldn't order from me because we were only shipping around Australia, surprise, we are now shipping worldwide. I've only had 1 international order so far, and that was from Germany, but so exciting. That was such good news. Back to the purpose of this video. The next book on this list is Egotistical Puck Boy by Finley and Saxon James. I have the model cover currently. Once again, this was a 5-star read. Not really surprising when it comes to Finley and Saxon James because I'm obsessed with almost everything that they put out. I don't know why I said almost. There hasn't been anything that I didn't like. This book follows Ezra, who we also met in the CU Hockey series. We met him in, where is it? Another chance to show off books from my collection. We met him in Line Mates and Study Dates, and also he popped up again in Puck Drills and Quick Thrills, I'm pretty sure. The new character that we get to learn about in this book is Anton. Now, Ezra and Anton are kind of opposites. Ezra is very open about his exploits. His name is always in the tabloids, whereas Anton has this kind of perfectly curated reputation and he doesn't really want anything to happen to it. Not that he has much of a choice when Ezra enters the scene. I'm pretty sure they play on 2 different teams. Do they? It's been a minute since I've read this. For a reason that I'm pretty sure we discuss in this book, but I can't remember off the top of my head, these boys don't get along. They just haven't. They assume that they never will. Not even when their attraction starts driving them together. Not even when they start hooking up because of it. Not even when Anton starts getting really possessive over who Ezra's with. Hello! I'm gonna put it out there before we delve into my review. That out of the 3 books in this series, I don't know if there's gonna be more. There are 3 out at the moment. This one is definitely my favorite. So I wrote, how good, are you kidding me? I knew I was gonna love this before I went into it. I mean, hello, Eden and Saxon and their hockey guys, come on. But I didn't expect to love it this much. I honestly think that Ezra and Anton have taken the place of my second favorite couple by these authors underneath Iris and Saint. I shelved this book as failed casual relationship, enemies to lovers, and an athlete romance, since they're both professional athletes. The next book on this list is one that I really didn't expect to love anywhere near as much as I did, and that is Let Me In by Luna David. It is a daddy boy romance, which I feel like when I started delving into MM romance, it was a trope that I stayed away from, but now it's one that I've kind of unexpectedly fallen in love with. This is also an age gap romance. So we have Liam, who is 20 years old, and then we have Cash, who is twice his age at 40 years old. So Liam lives in a small town. He's working his ass off to try to support his sister and his mum. And then he joins this app called the Boys Club, which is for boys like him to try to find a daddy, and I'm pretty sure vice versa. Eventually, he gets this message from Cash's profile and is kind of devastated because Cash seems like the perfect daddy for him, except he's over 600 miles away. But then he gets to talking with someone who's not actually Cash, but Cash's current boy, who is so distraught about leaving him alone that he's trying to find him a suitable boy before he actually leaves. So Liam and Cash's current boy start talking on this app. They organize everything. They set a date for Liam to arrive, which is when Cash's current boy will be out of the picture. They've thought of everything except for a surefire way to make sure Cash knows that Liam is going to arrive on his doorstep one day. It's a little bit touch and go in probably the first half of this book, I want to say, probably even the first 2/3. All I'll say is that when Liam originally turns up on Cash's doorstep, Cash turns him away because he doesn't think he is ready for that kind of relationship, and it isn't until later that he realizes he might have just let the next best thing to happen to him slip right through his fingers and disappear where he has no idea where he's gone. I must admit, I thought that this book was going to be very angsty when I first delved into it, and trying to explain that it's not angsty but it still made me cry so many times is a hard feat to accomplish. I want to say that it's not angsty because if it was, then I wouldn't be reading it. I don't like books with high levels of angst. The way Luna David wrote this book and the things that happen in this book just triggered my emotional side, and I could not stop myself from crying in this book. So again, I referenced that in my review as well, how much I cried. I also said I loved all of our characters, the development, the steam, the romance. It was perfect. Can't wait until we get the second book in this series and anything after that. So book 2 has been released. This was originally going to be a co-authored series, but now Luna David is just writing it themselves. So book 2 has been released, which follows Liam's friend Maddie and one of Cash's friends, whose name I can't quite remember. It's right there, but it's not coming to me. Like I mentioned before, this is an age gap and daddy romance, so I have it listed on both of those shelves on my Goodreads. I also have it listed as a first time romance, since there is a first time scene in this book. It has a very good makeup scene, which yes, I have that as a shelf on my Goodreads. I want to reread the good makeup scenes. I also have an I Cried shelf, which this book is currently listed on. Next on this list is Moth by Lily Mayne. This is book 5 in her Monstrous series, and after the first book, Win, I think this takes place of my second favorite in this series. That sentence did not want to come out of my mouth. This one follows Moth, who is half human, half monster, and isn't really accepted by anyone in the world at this point in time, and Charlie, who we met in book 2, Eden. Charlie is currently a soldier with the military, by the way. I should probably add a little bit of context about this world. In the first book, it is all really well established. About 20 years in the past, there was a tear between the human world and the monster world, and monsters kind of invaded and started tearing the world apart. Humans now live in these massive cities, mainly along the coast. Anyone who doesn't live in one of the cities is labeled a raider because they're taking their chances out in the world where all of the monsters are. So there you go, a little bit of context. Charlie and Moth decide to set out on a little bit of a mission to try to find Cat. So Cat is a raider. He is the leader of one of the biggest raider camps in their part of the world. I think they're in Nebraska. Cat went missing several months ago, and Charlie actually met him without realizing who he was in one of the previous books. So him and Moth decide to set out and try to find him, find where he is. And along the way, of course, there is a forced proximity trope. They have to spend a lot of time together in close spaces. They start to learn a little bit more about each other, and then of course feelings start to develop. I really loved these characters because Moth is so grumpy, but he's also so touch-starved and he just wants to be loved, and I want to protect him from everything. And then you have Charlie, who is our pansexual golden retriever of a character, but he also has this really vulnerable side to him, but he also has this really protective side of him, especially when it comes to Moth. So I love both of these characters so much, if you couldn't tell. In my review, did I mention this was a 5-star rating? I don't think I did. 5 stars for this book. So in my review, I said that I didn't really know what to expect going into this despite the teasers, because we didn't really know a lot about either of our characters before delving into this book. I was also really happy because there are dual perspectives in this book. With all of the other books so far, it has just been a sole perspective from the human character's point of view, but in this book, it's not every chapter we alternate, but we do get we do get chapters from both Moth and Charlie's point of view. Yes, I did say I think Danny and Wynn are my favorite couple in this series so far, but I don't know who takes the second spot. It was Ghost and Owry, but Moth and Charlie might be coming for it. Hi. What you doing? This next one is You and Me by Tal Bauer, another 5-star read and one that I have already reread because I loved it so much. So in this book, we are following Luke and Landon. They are both single dads, 2 boys who just so happen to be best friends. They're on the same football team in I think their last year of high school. Broseph, I'm trying to film a video here. Say hi to the camera. She's like, I would rather do anything else. What are you doing with that paw? She loves me. I promise. She's like, not on your life. It's been a while since you guys have seen Mocha. She's still kicking. She's 17. This story has so much character development in it, I feel. Luke he's struggling. He's not having the best time of things. He doesn't have the best relationship with his son, especially after his wife passed away a year ago from a drug overdose. No matter how much he wants to fix his relationship with his son, nothing he's doing really seems to be working. He seems to be making all of the wrong decisions. And so eventually when he turns up at one of his son's football games, he meets Landon. And Landon is like the super dad. The relationship that Landon has with his son is exactly what Luke wants to have with his son, and the dads kind of hit it off. They establish such a good friendship, and while Landon is out and proud, Luke has always assumed that he's straight until these feelings kind of start creeping up on him. He has to figure out what exactly they mean and if he wants to act on them. Onto the review. I wrote this book was absolutely perfect. I feel like it's not very often that we say that a book is perfect, that in our opinion we wouldn't change a damn thing, but this is one of those for me. I said that I already knew I'd enjoy it because hello, it's Tal Bauer, but I had no idea I'd enjoy it this much. The characters, the development of both of the characters as individuals and their relationships with each other, the romance, the emotions. I said that it felt like we were swept up into this world and immediately accepted into the family that this community has built together. The team, the mums, Luke's boss, even Bethany, who is Landon's ex-wife. But I said that more than anything, you could immediately see that Luke and Landon were made for one another. Even though we read a lot of romances, I feel like there aren't many instances where you can look at 2 characters and say that they were created for one another or that they were placed on this earth to find one another, legitimate soulmates. But that is 100% the case with these 2 guys because they complement each other so well. Also, I made a note that I won't read out loud because it's a little bit spoilery, but that the ending of this book was one of my favorite endings of any book of all time. It was so sweet. And if you've already read it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but if you haven't read it, I hope you love it as much as I did. Now, what I shelved this book as, I shelved it as an awakened sexuality romance since Luke identified as straight at the beginning of the novel. It's also well, it isn't a character arc, it features a giant character arc. I said that it was a feel-good romance, it was a friends to lovers, it gave me high expectations. We do deal with grief, death, and drug addiction, drug abuse, drug overdoses, so if any of those things are triggers for you, then just be aware of that going into this book. Next. This was actually a new author to me last year. So this is Playing the Player by Beth Bolden. It's the 2nd book in her Miami Piranhas series. I think there are 4 books out at the moment. I haven't read the 4th one yet. I've been putting it off for some reason, even though I know I'm gonna love it. I find I do that occasionally. Again, a 5-star rating. So this book is another athlete romance. It's a football romance, actually, following Logan and Dylan. So Logan moved to the Miami Piranhas for a bit of a change of scenery. He'd recently come out of the closet and he just wanted a chance to live his life like he should be able to. Then when Dylan arrives in Miami, normally the team would hook him up with one of the footy team's apartments while he tries to find a place to live, but it's currently uninhabitable due to a water main break, and so Logan offers Dylan a place to stay in his apartment, and he's thinking that a best friend is exactly what he needs at this point in time. The issue with that though is with how close they've become as best friends, when someone from Logan's past pops up out of the blue and decides to label Logan and Dylan's friendship as more than it is, Dylan has the grand idea to run with it and pretend that they're in a relationship just to try to get this person off of Logan's back. Now, we all know exactly what happens when couples try to fake a relationship in a romance novel. It always ends up leading to more than they originally thought. which is where half the fun of this book comes from. So on to the review. Very short. I said, Beth Bolden strikes again. I've loved every book written by her so far and cannot wait for Pax and Davis's story to come out in October. Kind of surprised that Pax and Davis's book isn't on this list unless I've missed it. Every book in this series has been fantastic. If you're in the mood for an athlete romance, then I would definitely recommend delving into this one. I shelved the, hold up, I just saw this book has less than 500 ratings on Goodreads. How is that possible? We need to bump that number up. I labeled this as an athlete romance, awakened sexuality, because I'm pretty sure Dylan identified as straight at the beginning of this novel. A fake relationships romance, friends to lovers. This is another book by Tal Bauer, and that is Secret Service. So another 5-star rating from Caitlin. Honestly, even just looking at the cover of this book, I'm like, I want to reread it. As soon as I read the blurb for this book, I was like, I am hooked. It is the love story between the President of the United States and the head of his Secret Service team. Are you kidding me? More often than not with Tal Bauer's books, there's generally an element of suspense to it, and this comes in the form of the president going missing. So we read a lot from Reese's point of view, who is a Secret Service agent. I feel like we read a majority of the book from his perspective and not a whole lot from Brennan's perspective, who is the president. But the layout of this book was so interesting to me because we start the very first chapter with the characters already being in an established relationship, but I think the end of that chapter is where Brennan goes missing. So the rest of the novel is alternating timelines between Reese trying to find Brennan ASAP and going back in time and seeing how exactly their relationship got started to begin with. The chapters do alternate fairly frequently, which was so fun to read. All of the characters were super enjoyable. On to the review. So I said this book was perfection. Tal Bauer always seems capable of creating characters that we can't help but love. Even one of the other, he's not a protagonist, of course, but he's such a key character in this novel, and that is Sheridan. Fell in love with him. Sheridan was honestly like one of my favorite characters ever, and I really hope that he gets his own romance one day. I really do. I said that I love them all so much, and I love the relationships that they formed and strengthened within this book, especially Reese and Sheridan. Their bond, their friendship, so good. It is not often that I care about a friendship between a protagonist and a side character just as much, if not more, than I care about the main romance. Again, I mentioned how big of a fan I was as to the layout of this story. Said it was so fun to read. It definitely kept me guessing throughout the whole novel and craving those moments of sweetness between Reese and Brennan. Those two are honest to God soulmates, and no one can tell me any differently. I'm pretty sure I was filming a reading vlog when I read this book, so I might see if I can find that and link it up here somewhere in case you want to go back and watch it. Onto the trope labeling, the shelving on my Goodreads. I labeled this as an awakened sexuality romance, bodyguard, forbidden relationships, and that's it. Next is another one that I didn't expect to love, and that is PSI-Lowview by Isla Olson. I have read a few of Isla Olson's other books before, but they've been like 3 or 4 star reads, nothing that I would add to a favorites of the year list. This one made the cut. So this book, get this, is a sister's ex-fiance romance. I'm always in the mood for a sister's ex romance because all the ones that I've read have been fantastic. So we're following Wes and Devon. Despite the fact that they were about to be brothers-in-law, they can't stand each other. And it's not until they start actually talking and texting after the wedding was called off that they realize they've both been having these like hate sex fantasies about one another, and they're kind of like, what if they don't have to be fantasies? I feel like there's not a whole lot else to add to that blurb. It's essentially an enemies to lovers sister's ex romance. How they get there though is the fun part. Even what I said in the review, I said a sister's ex romance, even better, a sister's ex fiance romance, sign me up. I said seeing Wes and Devon go from enemies to enemies who might not dislike each other so much anymore, who have really hot sex, to people who've somehow managed to develop feelings for the other when it was absolutely the last thing that they expected, was a work of art. I shelved this book as enemies to lovers, failed casual relationship, forbidden relationships, and sister's ex, because I don't have a shelf for sister's ex fiance. Second last book on this list is another one that I own. Hold up. And that is Gravity by Tal Bauer. I'm not shocked at all that this is on this list. I was actually, when I was reading the blurb for Secret Service, I was like, why isn't Gravity on this list? So if you couldn't tell by the cover, this is a hockey romance, and we are reading about Bryce and Hunter. So Bryce is a big name in the NHL. He is the captain of Montreal's team. He's an all-star hockey player, but he has been keeping big secrets, and that is that he's been having these thoughts and these dreams about what it would be like to be with a man. And then we have Hunter, who believes that he's nothing special, he's just your average hockey player. But average hockey players don't just go and get themselves invited to the all-star weekend where he happens to meet his idol, Bryce. And next thing you know, they are spending hours on the ice together, they're talking, their friendship is almost immediate, and so is the attraction. I just realized how weird this light is looking. Can you sort yourself out, please? At some point in the All-Star weekend, they happen to share a kiss, and the rest of the novel is them figuring out what the hell that means for the both of them. I was obsessed with this book. I gave it a 5-star rating. I couldn't put it down. And why is it that every single time I pick up a Tal Bauer book, I want to reread it? Now, I didn't write a review for this, but I know that I absolutely loved it. I loved both of our characters. Watching them come to grips with what their feelings for each other actually meant and how that would impact their careers in the NHL was beautiful. I feel like you just can't go wrong with Tal Bauer's stories and his characters. They are all so lovable. Their relationships and their connections just feel so real. Now, on to what I shelved this book as. I shelved it as an athlete romance, awakened sexuality, faves of 2022, of course, and a protagonist gets injured romance. I'm not going to tell you who, I'm not going to tell you how. That is for you to figure out when you finally pick up this book. All I will say is that it is a guaranteed happily ever after, and both of our characters are completely fine. Now, I believe there is only one book on this list, and it's actually one that I referenced before, where I was like, I'm kind of surprised that isn't on this list. Be surprised, Caitlin, because it is on this list. That is Playing by the Rules by Beth Bolden, which is the third book in the Miami Piranhas series. I remember being so excited for this book when the first one was released. We met these characters in book 1. I thought they were going to have their own book in book 2, but it didn't end up being their romance until book 3, and the wait was so worth it, let me tell you. Since this is a Miami Piranhas book, we are of course focusing on a romance within the team, and this particular novel is focusing on the love story between Pax, who is the new and young quarterback for the Miami Piranhas, as well as Davis, who is Pax's quarterback coach. A quarterback and his coach. Oh. Davis was a phenomenal quarterback himself, but for a reason that I won't disclose because I can't actually remember if it's a spoiler or not. I don't think it is, but I won't mention it. But for that reason, he is no longer playing football. He is a part of the coaching staff instead. Now, Pax and Davis have felt the connection between them from day one, but both of them know that it could be potential career suicide for both of them by acting on whatever they feel, which is heartbreaking because reading about the romance between the two of them and being able to see just how strong their feelings are for one another, but they can't do anything about it. Oh, it breaks my heart. This was another 5-star rating from me, and I actually wrote a review for this one. I said that there is absolutely nothing about this book that I would change, like a romance between a quarterback and his coach, and a slow burn at that. Like, what more could you possibly want? I said that I love books that feature no magical aspects, and yet it still seems as though the two main characters are soulmates, fated mates, however you want to word it, because these two were made for each other and no one can tell me otherwise, and I can't wait to see what the rest of this series is going to bring. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for all of your comments and everything on my past videos. While I haven't been filming, I still have been checking in on them every now and then, and it is always nice to see new comments, new faces. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. Oh, before I forget, I did want to add like a little new segment to the end of my videos, which is a quick little discussion about what I'm currently reading. I know that I film a lot of reading vlogs, but sometimes I don't get to talk about every book that I read, so I just want to chuck it in there. At the moment, I'm reading Can't Say Goodbye by Finley. It came out yesterday, and I am loving it. I think I'm honestly like 80% or something of the way through this book, and I'm not ready for it to be over. I'm obsessed. I can already tell it's gonna be a 5-star read, but my camera just started flashing at me that it's gonna die, so I'm gonna have to cut this segment short. I just wanted to say also, please comment down below what book you are currently reading. Tell me what you love about it, tell me what it's about, and because I love hearing what you guys are reading. I love knowing what you're up to. I'll just say thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys with another video hopefully next week, or at least sometime soon. Oh, before I go, there was one other question that I wanted to ask, and that is, do you guys mind seeing business type content? So I mentioned before I own my own bookstore. It's called A Novel Addiction. And I do a lot of unboxings for my business, but I haven't filmed any of them. And I know that I personally generally like watching unboxings no matter what kind of book it is. I just find it really exciting. So let me know down below if you guys would also like to be kept up to date on any unboxing videos or rec videos for my business. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!